Okay.
Unmute.
Okay. There will be questions, hopefully time for questions. Okay, good morning. Just to add a little bit to what Pastor Jacob was sharing, I feel like it's been over the course of several conversations at the church, whether we're talking about environmental justice and sustainability or about immigrant justice. I'll ask him, is now the appropriate time to throw our bodies into the machinery, the gears of the machinery? Well, now it seems very clear that yes, it is. So I wanted to include this Mario Savio quote because it's really instrumental about that feeling that you get when, yes, it's time. The question that are the material conditions present? Yes. Are the psychosocial conditions present? Yes. Or do we need to be part of making those psychosocial conditions a reality? So I'm going to talk a little bit about nonviolent resistance. I don't think we need to go over the multitude of reasons why it's necessary, but I do want to mention that nonviolence does not mean avoiding conflict. It's actually completely the opposite. Martin Luther King even said that nonviolence is spiritually aggressive. So now's our chance. Just want to talk a little bit about nonviolence and nonviolence, kind of place the conversation around the use of nonviolent resistance in the context of what power is and how we use it. Give light to some of the myths that are out there about nonviolence, and then talk a little bit about some of the ways that we've used mass nonviolent civil disobedience here in the Inland Empire over the past years, and give you a couple examples of some of the communities of faith that have used nonviolent civil disobedience very recently, maybe for a little bit of inspiration. And my hope is that we can leave here with some resources and some inspiration and some tools we can use as we move forward. Does that sound good? Yeah. Okay. So I just want to mention that the use of nonviolence, the preference for nonviolence, is not a condemnation of other types of resistance, other tactics used by oppressed communities, especially in other geographic locations and in other contexts where people don't have the same kind of privileges that we do and really have no other recourse. I also want to mention that nonviolence is not inherently morally superior to other approaches. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why. And just one more thing, there's a difference between nonviolence as a principle and nonviolence as a tactic. And this is something that SNCC, the Southern Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, used to talk about during the Civil Rights Movement. And it's something I think we've talked about a little bit here in conversations around, that moral dilemma, or around, what would we have done what Dietrich Bonhoeffer did when he attempted to assassinate Hitler in the build-up to World War II. Good morning, Jeremiah. So just to put this into a little bit of a context, I was a community organizer with a faith-based organization based in San Bernardino for a couple of years. It was an affiliate of, at the time it was called PICO, People Improving Communities Through Organizing. Now it's called Faith in Action, which is probably a better word because it's faith-based organizing. And some of the principles, or organizing principles, that are kind of drilled into our heads as organizers and leaders are about power. And so a couple that I wanted to share that I thought might be instructive are power's ability to act, power is the ability to reward and punish, and power is organized people, or organized money, organized people and organized money. So this can help us think about ways that we already take action, the ways that we use our power, and to nonviolently resist. It helps us remember that there are a lot of things that we're already doing that are nonviolence. It helps us to enter into a space of nonviolent resistance if we understand that in many ways we're already practitioners. We're already using this power. We're already involved in charity and mutual aid work. We're already doing, especially if you're here every Sunday morning, and there's a lot of education work that goes on. Journalism, we're already using our voices to make comments during the public section of meetings. We're already involved in boycotts or boycotts, the opposite, putting our money in good places and divesting from those institutions that are complicit in human rights violations. And we're already doing the demonstrations and marches and hopefully strikes. I think we're going to see a lot more boycotts and strikes as we proceed over these next 4 years. There's many other examples I think you can think of that we're already doing. And there's many examples we can think of if we think historically. How have oppressed communities used nonviolence, and how have ally communities stand in allyship also using nonviolence? Here's just a couple of examples. Yesterday, there was a women's march rally in Rancho Cucamonga. You have a picture of me and some of my, actually I'm not in that one. I took that picture. Me and some of my comrades at our weekly Ontario United for Liberation rally in Ontario. We do that every Sunday at 2. At the bottom is my sister at our rally last week against mass deportations, also in Ontario. She brought our whole crew out. I put a picture of Medea Benjamin getting hauled out of, I think it was a session of Congress. This tactic of disrupting, is nonviolence and using that power of disruption in a very strategic way. And she's also really highlighted the tactic of bird dogging. You've seen the videos where she goes and just follows members of Congress and say, "Oh, Mr. Senator, member of Congress, do you support divest? Do you support stop sending weapons to Israel?" That sort of thing. It's beautiful videos. And then boycotts. Of course, this is a graphic from the BDS international movement, talking about how boycotts are effective when they're targeted and they're focused, not, "Oh, I'm not going to shop at such and such place because they're rude to me." That's not a boycott. Boycott is a collective action. That's what gives it its power. Let's talk a little bit about some of the myths. No shade on Sister Asada, but this quote has been going around a lot. But I think it's really important to talk about. This is from her memoir, Asada Shakur, now in exile in Cuba. She was freed from prison after being involved in the Black liberation struggle. She says, "Nobody in the world, nobody in history has ever gotten their freedom by appealing to the moral sense of the people who were oppressing them." You cannot really argue with that statement. But I think what it does is makes people think that we don't, given the hyper-militarization of the police and of border agents and of our society in general, that we don't really have any way to resist that isn't, going and getting our guns and doing the weapons training and the military type, practice. Which, like I said, I'm not hating on anybody else's way of resisting, but I think the practice of nonviolence has changed over time. When Gandhi was organizing in India and he saw what was going on in Europe, he wrote a letter to Hitler. He wrote 2 letters. And in both of them, he addressed him as friend. This idea that we win over our oppressors by befriending them, by impressing upon them with our moral values, our stature, and using moral suasion, right? And this is true to an extent, even up to the time of the Civil Rights Movement. Dr. King was very committed to moral suasion until he tried to organize in the North. And he realized that their power that they had in the South was not working in the North at all. And he acknowledged as much in his 1967 address to the American Psychological Association. So we're really in the post-moral suasion era of nonviolent resistance. And I think the point here is not that we shouldn't use nonviolence, or we shouldn't still try to persuade those people who we think might be persuadable, but that the reason we use nonviolence is not necessarily because we believe our oppressors have any sense of morality. Imagine trying to have a conversation about Donald Trump, why it's not right to separate families, right? It's not going to work. But we use it because it's strategic and because it is actually effective. How is that? We don't have the guns. Enter into the conversation Dr. Erica Chenoweth. She wrote this book along with her colleague Maria Stephan, and it was published in 2011, Why Civil Resistance Works. And I just want to crib a little bit from Maria Stephan's website. She says, "I wrote this book, the book I was working on," she's talking about, she's in Afghanistan at the time. "The book I was working on then Why Civil Resistance Works, which I co-wrote with Erica Chenoweth, examined all major violent and nonviolent campaigns from 1900 to 2006, with cases ranging from the Gandhian-led independence movement to the Ukraine Orange movement. We wanted to systematically test which form of resistance, violent or nonviolent, had been more effective at challenging the most formidable foes. And what do they find? The main finding was that the nonviolent campaigns using boycotts, protests, strikes, and other nonviolent tactics had been twice as effective as violent insurgencies. They achieved their goals 53% of the time compared to 26% for nonviolent campaigns. Just to add, we also found that political transitions driven by civil resistance led to democratic outcomes 57% of the time versus 6% for transitions driven by armed insurgencies. Nonviolent resistance was much less likely to lead to civil war compared to violent insurrections, and more likely to advance social and economic development. So in both the short and longer term, nonviolent resistance had the comparative advantage over violence. So they did statistical analysis, they did case studies, they did basically their homework, they did a lot of research. And the reason why nonviolence is more effective or has historically tended to have greater success is because of what they call participation advantage. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If I'm an organizer and I'm going out and recruiting and you're interested, you've got values, you've got passion, and you say, okay, what do I need to do? And I say, all you got to do is leave your job and family, come with me up to the mountains. We're going to cook our meals over campfire and we're going to train every day. And then we're going to go into action and you might get wounded or killed. You with me? It's a tough sell. It really is. And that's true for any type of resistance that uses any type of high risk strategy, military strategies, that sort of thing. But if I say, if you come to me, if I'm out organizing, recruiting in the community, and you're interested, and you're passionate, you have values, and you say, what do I need to do? I say, come to a meeting, come to a prayer vigil, sign this petition, join a neighborhood group, something that has a lower level risk involved. You have a lot broader, a lot higher chances that a broader base of community are going to be willing and able to participate, especially if they're not afraid that their kids are going to get hurt, that sort of thing. And I think that's why it's important to be clear about what your action is entailing. Is it a family-friendly action? Bring the kids and do everything you can to make sure that those kids that are coming are not going to be at risk. Another big myth about nonviolence is really not a myth about nonviolence so much as a myth about power. And there is this concept that power is monolithic, that power is centralized, often in one individual. I have a picture. Oh, we don't have that picture. Y'all saw this horrible video, rage bait video. Oh, let me back that up. Now what do I do? No. Oh, sorry. Give me a second. Yeah.
I was just able to get the book through the public library. They have it in audio and ebook.
Oh, they do. So Carolee is sharing that the book is available from the public library and they have it both audio and ebook. What am I? Sorry. Oh my goodness. I used the wrong keyboard. Sorry, you guys. Okay, there's the picture. Yes, this rage bait photo. So this myth about power is one that I think that Gene Sharp really.
Share it again. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. Oh no. Let's see. Technical difficulties. Sorry, friends. Yes, this figure, power is concentrated in this figure, right? Whatever Trump or whoever the dictator of the moment is says goes, and there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries said as much, which is super disappointing. So this is a myth, right? And Gene Sharp, I think, helped us tear that myth down in his series of books about nonviolent resistance. Power is not monolithic. He talks about how power is actually diffuse throughout society, and actually ultimately derives from the subjects of the state, right? And that's us, right? So in order to illustrate, we're gonna do a brief exercise. I hope you all are with me. You all remember when we were kids, we used to play Simon Says. I'm Simon, you remember the rules. I am Simon, I give commands, but you only obey when I say Simon Says, right? So let's play. Simon says, stand up. As you're able, yes. Simon says, put your hands on your head. Simon says, put your hands on your hips. Simon says, clap once. Simon says, clap twice. Clap 3 times. Okay, sit down, you lose. Simon says, touch your shoulders. Simon says, make out with the person next to you.
How you doing?
Okay, you can sit down. Simon says, sit down. Simon says, sit down. I know some of you married people were like, all right, this is our chance. Or maybe not many. The point of this, I think this is the point, is to show that we are the ones that have the power to obey or disobey, right? Who has the power in that exercise? And here's another graphic way to show the same thing. So both Gandhi and Gene Sharp, their concept of nonviolent resistance relies heavily on withdrawing our support from the systems, the institutions, or the industrial complexes that we're part of, if you will. And that's why I mentioned that a lot of us are actively engaging in disengaging with the systems of oppression and institutions that are perpetuating violence. We pulled our money out of Chase and Bank of America, and we're putting it into local credit unions. Our investment profiles are no longer investing in fossil fuels and weapons manufacturers. And we've pressured the unions and other institutions we're part of to divest from Caterpillar, Intel, and Chevron. And we don't shop at Walmart, right? But what happens when, despite our disengagement, the machine plows on? That's when we can use our collective power not to disengage, but to confront. So we have a long history of using nonviolent civil disobedience here in our region. And I just want to share a couple of examples for some of you that may not have been present or not aware maybe. Oh, I'm skipping the wrong thing. This is the one that graphically shows another idea of withdrawing our power, right? Disengaging. This is a photo of a group of dreamers that committed an act of civil disobedience right outside of Valley College in June of 2011. This was at a time when the San Bernardino County Sheriffs had a 287G agreement, a deportation agreement with ICE, and this was before DACA. And so they put their bodies on the line. They risked arrest and deportation to say, we did not want our local authorities collaborating with ICE. This was in 2011. There was actually a series of actions in San Bernardino at that time. And then not too long after, here in Eastvale, the Occupy movement, we were Occupy Riverside, and we gathered folks from Orange County, LA, got everybody together, and we targeted a warehouse that was being used by Walmart on the Day of Action Against Corporations. Everywhere in the country, the Occupy movement was targeting corporations that were part of ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, because of the way that they were buying and selling democracy, basically drafting this proposed legislation and taking it all over the place that was pro-corporate. And now I'm blocking my own quote here. All the 99%ers are inconvenienced, we apologize, but unfortunately, restoring democracy may cause a few inconveniences. And the funny thing, we thought, okay, let's just shut down this warehouse. And we got there, no trucks come in, come out, because we're using our bodies to block. We have like hundreds of people. Like, this was easy. What do we do now? Should we go home, or should we shut down some more warehouses? And we ended up shutting down 10 warehouses that same day. Okay, This is another action that I want to highlight. This was just around the time of Thanksgiving in 2013. This really, the Adelanto Detention Center, we've known that it was coming before it was put in place. So we were trying to even stop it from getting built and stop them from housing people. It got built anyways, it started housing people. But this was our really first big action as part of the Shutdown Adelanto campaign. This was in 2013, so Thanksgiving 2013, these three young women. I'm not sure if you could tell, but they have bike locks around their necks, and they locked themselves by the neck to the gate that opens and closes to let the vans in, to bring people in to detention, and that takes people out when they're getting removed, when they're getting taken out. So we, again, got everybody and locked down and shut down the detention center, at least for that one day. Two of the young women in this picture are undocumented or DACA holders. And another one that I couldn't really find good pictures of, but in December 2016, the Indigenous Defense Resistance and Unity Movement, IDRUM, which is based in the Inland Empire, again, gathered our comrades together, and we decided to use our bodies to stop the flow of vehicles and people into the Safariland facility, which is in Ontario. And we had no idea that there was a weapons manufacturer right here in Ontario until we got photos and footage from Morton County, South Dakota, where we found out that the Sheriff's Department and the private security contractors that were using less lethal weaponry and materials against water protectors who were trying to defend indigenous lands from the pipeline that was being imposed on them. Those weapons came from here in Ontario. So we said, we're here, we stand in solidarity, we're part of the Indigenous Solidarity Movement, and we stand up for Indigenous sovereignty. We're gonna do what we can in our little neck of the woods. And we held that facility all morning. We started with prayer, and we started with songs first thing in the morning, and we finally got kicked out by like 1 o'clock. But at least half the morning, they were not able to do business as usual. Just a couple of examples. There have been many, many more, but this is things that are going on right here. And I wanted to share a couple of examples of communities of faith putting their values into action recently. So hopefully if I click these, this will work and we'll still screencast. Let me see, turn off. Okay. Okay, so it's going to repeat if I don't. This is an interfaith coalition from many, many Christians involved, but also Hindu groups, Jewish Voice for Peace, and I think a few others that undertook this strategic intervention at the CUCC conference, the Christians United for Israel. It's the largest Christian Zionist organization in the country. It boasts, I forget, millions, I think, of members, because it includes entire denominations. And this is a time when Israel was actively committing genocide, and a time when, imagine, what if people of faith did not stand up? What if they did not sing and pray and create this, visual demonstration that no, you do not speak for Christianity? Well, it would have basically been, they would have felt that they were morally justified. They would have felt, if the government would be getting a pass, right? So this is just an example. That one was, I don't think anybody got arrested in that one, but I love the use of music in that that clip, yeah. There we go. Oh yeah. So let's go back really quick. I have two keyboards and it keeps throwing me off. Let's take a look at this one. So same issue, also Palestine liberation. That was Mennonite Action, which is a group, is a where the way the organization that the Mennonites or Anabaptists use. They have deep roots in nonviolence, Christian nonviolence, inspired by the gospel, to be pacifists, and not only to be pacifists, but to intervene for peace. And then this one, it's on Instagram. See if it'll pop up.
In trouble on Good Friday. 25 people were arrested for a nonviolent direct action at the headquarters of Lockheed Martin, the world's largest weapons contractor, where the weapons being used in Gaza are made. Hundreds of others joined in the action during Holy Week as members of the Gaza ceasefire pilgrimage walked over 20 miles, roughly the length of Gaza, from the Liberty Bell to Lockheed Martin. And here's why we did it. The event was part of a global movement with similar walks happening in over 200 cities around the world, in every continent, including Antarctica. Our message is simple: end the genocide, let in the aid, release the hostages, and stop sending weapons and funds to Israel. Weapons like those made at Lockheed Martin. On October 7th, 1,200 precious lives were lost. Every one of them a sacred child of God, made in the image of God. The world stood with Israel against the merciless slaughter and terror of October 7th. And we must not hesitate to stand against anti-Semitism and all hatred today. But in the days since October 7th, we have watched the state of Israel pour out its wrath on the people of Gaza, killing around 200 people a day, one child every 10 minutes, often using the Bible as a weapon to justify their revenge. My mama taught me 2 wrongs don't make a right. And the scripture says that we don't repay evil with evil, but we overcome evil with good. In the past 170 days since October 7th, over 32,000 people have been killed. 15,000 of those are children. Over 74,000 people have been injured. Thousands are missing under the rubble. We are watching a genocide, ethnic cleansing, live streamed on social media, and most of our leaders are silent, even complicit. As Palestinian pastor Reverend Luther Isaac said, Gaza has become the moral compass of the world. To speak out against the violence of October 7th does not make you anti-Palestinian. It makes you decent, human, moral, compassionate. And to speak out against the violence since October 7th is not to be anti-Semitic or pro-Hamas. It's to be decent, human, moral, and compassionate.
Okay, and there was another video. They did have some really good media at this action. And it's actually a series of actions leading up to the shutdown. One of them, I couldn't find the video. I wanted to share it with you, but it's clergy leaders. They're all lined up on the street. It's a public street, and then when it gets to Lockheed Martin, it becomes a private street. So they're on the wrong side of the line on the private area, and the cops come and they're trying to kick him out, and they get on their bullhorns and saying you have to leave. This is a unlawful assembly, disperse, give them the disperse order, and they just all of them just together just start doing the Our Father, and just completely ignoring the cops. it was beautiful. And Churches for Middle East Peace, which is a coalition of many different denominations that the UCC, along with the Disciples of Christ, helped to co-found. The president, the executive director was there leading the prayer. So that was, and I follow Rich on Instagram and Facebook. It's a great source of inspiration. Okay, so those are some examples of some ways that communities of faith have, put their bodies on the line and used nonviolent action recently. And there's many, many other examples we could think of. You guys could probably think of some examples too. But I want to share a couple of thoughts and a couple of resources. One of those thoughts is that when the Dreamers were doing civil disobedience, targeting the Obama campaign, and I should mention, a lot of the leaders of that campaign were from here. We're from Pomona, we're from San Bernardino, we're from Fontana, we're from this area. And by using civil disobedience against the Obama campaign during his re-election campaign, that was how we were able to get DACA, right? Very, very strategic, very effective. But they were using a calculus based on the political situation, the conditions at the time. We're not in that time right now. We're not in that time anymore. The conditions are different. And for people to come out of the shadows and say, I'm undocumented and unafraid now is much, much different than doing it in 2011 or 2012 or 2008. So to me, that means that those of us that have the privilege to not having to risk deportation by standing up and speaking out, it's much more incumbent on us now to do that for those who cannot, who are a much greater risk if they were to say undocumented, unafraid now. Another thing that I want to mention, some of these actions, some of them are high energy, they're fun, there's tension, it's an emotional situation, it's intense. Some people, there's kind of like a fetishization. Well, there's fetishization of violence too, but there's also a fetishization of this, conflict that we have when we're doing a nonviolent action. But change doesn't come from one action. Change comes from sustained actions, having your target, focusing on it, and hitting it in different ways over a course of time, escalating, being strategic, and also using all the other tools that are in your tool belt, the media, the boycotts, the divestment, all that stuff. And so, this is just kind of a word to the wise. Don't expect change just from, getting arrested one time. I want to share a couple of the books and other resources that I used to put this presentation together. One is the Erica Chenoweth book. One is Eric McVeigh's Full Spectrum Resistance in 2 volumes. This author, Srđan Popović, he was one of the leaders of the Serbian movement, nonviolent movement that brought down the Milosevic dictatorship in Serbia. And he went out to found this organization, Canvas, which is listed on the websites. And they were really famous for Activism, using humor, using street theater to basically to laugh at the regime. And ridicule can be the most powerful tool that we have. So I wanted to throw his resource up there, the Blueprint for Revolution. And Gene Sharp has a ton of books, but the first one that really made a splash for nonviolence was The Politics of Nonviolent Action. And I mentioned Canvas, but this is the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict. It's got tons of great resources on their website. And then if you have a minute to read Dr. King's address to the APA, the American Psychological Association, this was at a time, I put the link, this is at a time in 1967 where the Voting Rights Act had already been signed and Jim Crow was being dismantled in the South. But in the North and here in LA, where those tactics were not as effective, he's basically saying that it wasn't as effective. People were writing. We were writing in the streets. And he says that the middle ground in between the nonviolent organizing they were doing in the South and the riots is exactly civil disobedience. So that's kind of that's the middle ground where you're using your moral jujitsu. Yeah, read it if you get a chance. Very fascinating read. We do not have too much time, but I think there's a little bit of time for discussions, comments, questions. I think probably a lot of you have experience in this field, so I'd love to hear what's in your heart.
This, right before the resources, the speaker that compared Gaza and Palestine, who was that speaker?
That I'm not sure who the speaker was, but that Instagram video was from the Red Letter Christians. Red Letter Christians is the organization. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm pretty willing to stand up, but I'm also anxious about being arrested. Can you give a little, I'm assuming you've been arrested for non-compliance. Can you give me an idea of what, I mean, is it like they throw you in, you see the judge, and then you get a citation? Or is it more like, no, you're staying for a while?
So the question is, what is it like to be arrested? And like any good legal practitioner, the answer is depends. People don't always get arrested, right? I mean, I'm actually I'm persuaded that it's not always in our best interest to get arrested, right? Especially if people are getting very, severe charges. We have a brother right now who is locked up in San Bernardino Central. He's a police brutality activist. He's facing felony charges for knocking on a cop's door. And he wasn't even trying to commit civil disobedience. It's not illegal to knock on a cop's door, but this is just an example. And he's going to court tomorrow. This is an example of a nonviolent action that could have got him in a lot of trouble.
I'm just thinking like play with a city.
Right. So yeah. So we don't. Sometimes if you want, if you're going to get arrested, you want it to be planned. Right? You want it to be the strategic part of the action. You want the cameras there because an arrest that nobody knows about is just, a charge on your record, and it's not on that nightly news to use that moral suasion that we do have. So sometimes they will do site release, take it right then and there, show up in court. Don't even take you in. Sometimes they'll just take you into the station, book you, take your fingerprints, maybe hold you for a little bit, and then release you on your own recognizance. Sometimes you'll have to go to court to get have a bail hearing or get out on recognizance that way. What you kind of want to do is avoid getting taken down to the Twin Towers or to West Valley, because one of my friends asked me, well, do they do cavity searches? That's what people are nervous about, and it's real. And if you're actually getting booked in to be housed there, then yeah, you go through everything. And I was actually part of a lawsuit against the invasive body searches that they do at Women's Central, because the argument was that they don't do this to the men, right? So they use my statement, my declaration about in that lawsuit. So yeah, it depends. And some, and the other thing is that while we can plan and be as conscientious as possible and take as many precautions as possible, there's always the unexpected. And the cops are very unpredictable. They come from households where there's a lot of domestic violence. They're usually the ones committing the domestic violence. But they're trained in the use of weapons, and they're trained to use violence. And a lot of them have been in active duty in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And especially if you're at a Palestine demonstration and they profile you that way, it could be very, very risky. So it's not, there's no guarantees. When you're taking a risk, you're taking a risk. But people that are willing and able to do that and take that risk, they should do it in a way that is informed about that risk, and they should have the resources available to deal with whatever consequences may be imposed. We stand by the people that get arrested, but if you're deliberately willing to get arrested, you should have a lawyer on retainer or something like that, and not be coming to the movement. Those, especially, most of us are poor, right? We don't really have those kind of resources to be paying for lawyers, right? So don't come with an empty cup, basically. That's not really, I think. Sorry, that's kind of a long-winded answer to a short question, but
it's just, I am willing if that's what it takes, but I don't want to play my cards early. I don't want to do it for something minor.
Yeah.
I'd like to hold my job as long as I can. I don't know that I would hold my job if I were to be in jail for more than, a week.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, definitely.
But
And
I'm a white woman, so I have a lot more privilege, and I think I'd definitely be treated differently than you would.
yeah. And those are all, the people that have disabilities, right? Do they need medication? You have to look at the way that trans and queer people are treated in lockup. Very different than the way that a hetero straight person is treated. People that have priors, right? Have you ever been arrested in the past? What was the degree of that arrest? And people that don't have a firm status in this country, people that are not citizens, even if they have lawful permanent residency, they could be taking a huge risk, even if it's a contempt of cop charge, right? A low level PC 148 or whatever. Those are all things that the individuals that get involved in this type of action have to consider very seriously. Yeah. Lots of ways to be involved. Yeah.
So on BOMSA, I want to work together to make sure that people are aware of what you are putting together. So first of all, can we do that? Is that information we can share on, because people would have to sign up for an account, but is that okay to have that be a little bit more public as you're planning?
As far as so that's another tricky question. Civil disobedience is by definition illegal. And so if you plan civil disobedience, you could be charged with conspiracy, even if the disobedience that you're about to commit is a misdemeanor. The conspiracy could be charged as a felony. So technically, we don't plan civil disobedience. Okay. The other thing is that when we do civil disobedience trainings, it's because people need to know what it's about. It's usually in preparation for an action. It's not just to learn, right? But yes, we can definitely be in coordination with BOMSA and whoever else wants to be involved. Yeah. Last comments, questions? Well, we're going to be in Ontario at 12 to 2, Colton Euclid. But we're not planning anything escalatory. That's just our weekly, solidarity rally. But yes, there are definitely things coming up. Adelanto, there was the Adelanto Detention Center was down to 3 people because we were being very successful in our efforts to get people out using litigation. And now the court order has been lifted, so they're starting to fill it up, which means that the movement to shut down Adelanto is all the more important now, and we're going to need to escalate there. Through nonviolent civil disobedience, I don't know, but we're going to have to do something for our friends and neighbors that are being detained and being held in the Adelanto Detention Center. Okay, thank you so much for joining. Thank you, online friends.